Welcome to the Build, Tell, Sell podcast, where we have behind-the-scenes conversations about the art of brand building, marketing, and sales strategies with creative industry insiders. I'm your host, Pel, of PELNYC. In this episode, I have the pleasure of talking to Ari Langsdorf as he breaks down his philosophy on brand building, marketing, and sales. Ari is an incredible sales rep and started out as an account and regional rep for Polo and PRPS respectively. He is now 1/4 principal partner of the foundation Showroom. His showroom currently represents brands like BBC, Ice Cream, Planes, Rocket, Kappa, Magnaframe, Polaroid, Marshall headphones, and many, many more. Thank you for, doing an interview. I really appreciate it. Let's just start
from having me.
Oh, of course. I know that you got a lot of jewels and gems and history to go through. Some of it I know, and probably a lot of it I don't know.
Well,
right?
I hope I don't disappoint, Pel. That was a really big build-up.
Nah, it's the truth. So let's start. Like, how did you get into fashion? What prompted it?
I'm a man raised by women. I got two older sisters and a mom, and my mom was a art major in college and got her master's in fine arts and was an interior designer growing up from my early childhood. And I was just like into it, when my sister got bar mitzvah at 13, my mom dressed me in this like super fly, pale pink pants, pale pink shirt, navy, just got me crispy with the handkerchief. And it was just something that I embraced. Like I insisted on wearing suspenders. I was like 10 years old, I remember. Mm-hmm. And I attribute a lot of that to my mother. My mother's, from the furniture she buys, the house she decorates a room, she's always about quality, not quantity. The woman spends more on a pair of eyeglasses than I would spend on like a car. But she's just always been into those like quirky, beautiful, tasteful things. And my mom has always cared a lot about getting dressed and feeling good and looking a certain way. And I just think, through her being an interior designer, through being surrounded by women my whole life, specifically in my household, it just was natural. I remember being in college and like walking to class and not feeling my fit. And like the store back then was a store called American Outfitters in State College, not American Eagle. This specialty boutique called American Outfitters, and I would stop and like pick up a Tommy fit and pick up a polo fit, change in the dressing room before I went to class. Like I was just crazy about that. I don't know.
So you got your passion from growing up in school. It continued, but when did you get your first entry point into actually working in the industry?
So it's funny. My college roommate and one of my best friends to this day, his dad was the president of a women's footwear company called 9 West, and he handled all the international sales. And I was super close with my boy's parents in school. And we would go to New York with his dad during market weeks, and we would run around the city and go shopping and party. And
I like how you just said 9 West, like it was like something local. Like,
well, depending on the audience, I don't know who's going to know 9 West, right? Yeah. It's female centric. It's $89.99 pumps and heels and boots
inside of many malls of America.
It is a multi-billion-dollar brand, and my friend's father started their international business, and the entire way that it was set up and managed was his vision. He started as like a door-to-door shoe salesman. Never went to college, none of it. Hustle. And became an executive at a huge company for many years, and I was around him a lot. And he was just an engaging guy, someone I respected and looked up to and remained super close to this day. And when we were seniors, I was a business major, and my boys were becoming day traders or finance guys at Morgan Stanley and whatnot. And I just knew I wanted to sell something. So I was interviewing at like ADP to sell payroll. I was interviewing at Morgan Stanley to sell securities. And I was with him one night, we were talking, and he's like, "What do you want to do?" And I was like, "I don't know." Like, he traveled a ton. My father traveled a lot. I traveled a lot in my youth and in college. And I was like, I kind of like what you do. You travel, you dress fly, you you're around, pretty girls and cool things. And he, like most people, takes knowing someone to get your foot in the door. I would say that that's in most cases in life. I gave my resume. When it went to HR. It had the signature of an SVP at one of their biggest brands. So I knew I was getting called.
Yep.
And I got lucky. The woman that interviewed me was a 32-year-old Jewish woman from Philadelphia. And I was a 22-year-old Jewish kid from Philadelphia. And she loved me. And she spent 4 or 5 hours with me. And she was like, 9 West was owned by a conglomerate called Jones Apparel Company that owned 25 different brands and licenses. And one of the licenses they owned was for Polo Jeans Company. And when I was in college in 97, 98, 99, all we wore was Polo, Tommy, and Nautica. So she literally was like, here's our portfolio of brands. What do you like? And I was, a Polo fanatic. So Polo Jeans Company, I was like, oh, that's me all day. She asked if I could stay. 24 hours later, I had an interview. 24 hours after that, they called me back and offered me a job that started in like 45 days. I wasn't even done college yet. So I had a job offer from Morgan Stanley. I had a job offer from ADP, and I had this job offer in New York City from Polo Jeans Company. And I just kind of, when you went to the interview, it was a wet bar and showrooms and flat screens, and you're a kid, you're 22 years old. It's the wow factor. It's girls and all that, all the things that inadvertently don't matter in a career and success that you get bamboozled by. You walk
all
into
the shiny things, all the shiny things.
Yeah, you walk into Morgan Stanley, it's a bunch of suits. You walk into ADP, it's a bunch of suits and it smells like air freshener. You walk into Polo, it's sexy. So for me, I drank the Kool-Aid when I walked in the door. The interview process, it was youthful, it was fun, it was the guys I met with, the women I met with were where it was more relaxed atmosphere, something that seemed more suiting to me. So I took it. I moved 45 days later to Manhattan, and that's kind of where it all started.
And how was your experience there?
I got really lucky. There were a bunch of early 30-year-old guys that were, in my mind, just older versions of myself. And my first boss was a woman named Lorraine Gianella. And she was a buyer at a department store that's no longer in business called Stearns. I'm going to age myself.
Oh,
used to be part of May Company. And she was a buyer for our category at Stearns. And when Stearns went out of business, she came over to Polo and became an account executive. And really, like in those days of department store buying, and in a lot of ways they are the same today, it was a math game. It was numbers. It was widgets. The product, the pieces, that was secondary towards the math.
Yeah.
The buyer would come in and say, last year I bought 10 t-shirts, 4 sold at this percentage, 3 sold at this percentage, 2 sold at this percentage. I need to anniversary this number.
Yeah.
Show me your best 12 t-shirts.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's how the business was done. It wasn't passion and fashion. It was
about real estate.
Yeah, it was real estate and margin.
Yep.
You were paying for your real estate. You were playing a numbers game.
Yep.
And I was a terrible math student in college and high school, full transparency. Shock a lot of people that know me now, but I mean, terrible. Like, took the bare minimum that I had to take to graduate in both cases. Lorraine was all about math. She one of the sharpest in that regard I'd ever met to this day. And she would like give me homework assignments. She would give me like flow charts. So in those days, you were an accountant. So an account executive wasn't selling product and managing the buyer's expectation in terms of the boutique world. It was more of managing the financial expectation and the targets you set forth financially at the beginning of each season. So a flow chart would look at 6 months or 4 months or 3 months of a business and say, this is the actual, this is how many goods I have on hand. These are the styles I have. This is my markdown rate. This is my profitability. This is my ending inventory. And Lorraine would say, okay, Ari, That's the end of January. Take me through March and tell me how you got there. How many goods do we have left? What percentage did we sell through? Why? What's our gross margin? Why? How much money do we got to give back to them, and why? So you would have to make assumptions. You would have to say, well, it's going to be Easter Sunday. So that Friday before, whatever account is going to have Easter sales, and they're going to put teas, and you would have to imagine that sale price is going to make the goods sell through at this much of a greater rate, which is going to make my margins go like this, but my inventory shrink considerably. And you would have to basically, like a model. We're in this Corona world right now, and these doctors get up and they talk about a model of death rate and illness and infection. And it was the same thing. You're running a model based off of more knowns than we know, but assumptions. And you're assuming that your assumptions are going to be correct. And in those days, you had budgets that you would give to these retailers to own your real estate, to your point. So projecting correctly and understanding what triggers moved those numbers was important, because you were
an algorithm.
You were bound to a budget that didn't change regardless of where you ended up.
Yeah.
So whatever triggers you could pull in the course to affect that end number was hyper important. And I was blessed because Lorraine would come to me for like the youth, would come to me for fashion, would come to me for the styles I liked, because I was 22 and I was the customer. But she taught me the like the lost art of retail math, which the generations after us never got, because it wasn't part of the business in most businesses the way it is now. You could come in with nothing and be fine. And a lot of people still can and could then, but the math was way more important then. So I got real lucky. And then Brian Boudreau, who was another one, was an incredible mentor to me, and taught me how to pitch, taught me how to hold a hanger, taught me how to be like.
Explain holding in a hanger.
When we were younger, there was no Brand Boom or New Order or FaceTime or Zoom. So you legit saw your customers, and that's how you got your orders.
So for those that don't understand, like when he says Brand Boom and New Order, it's the ability for you to sell over the internet virtually.
So there was no virtual form. There was no video text message.
Yeah.
So there was literally no virtual form of sales.
It was face-to-face,
other than a fax machine and line sheets. So you had people in your showroom, in your office. You went to trade shows, and buyers really came because that was the only way for them to see product. And you showed the lines, sometimes to one person, sometimes to 10 at a time, sometimes to 50. And Brian, at that time in my life, was like the best salesman I'd ever seen. I would sit in on his appointments and watch the way he literally held his hanger.
Yes.
Right? How he showed the garments, because a lot of being a great salesman isn't what you're showing, but how you show.
Yeah.
Just like it's not what you say, but how you say it, right? You and I can say the same thing and get two completely different reactions from the same person.
Yeah.
You and I could show the same thing to somebody and get two totally different reactions depending on how we choose to show it. So go ahead.
Question. So this journey of finding the artistry, and also you have this creative component of the art.
Well, like the artistry of sales to me is like it evolves, right? Like anything, you're an artist. The way you paint and draw today is probably far more sharp and different and more methodical than it was when you started.
True indeed.
So every stage in your career and every group of people you're around, you change. It influences your pitch. It influences the way you engage. It influences the way you communicate. So Brian was the start. Academics was like a huge. Seeing the way that those guys did it was huge for me, and being with Dre and them.
So let's explain. So from you being at Polo, how did you wind up getting over to academics?
So I had like two different stints at Polo Jeans Company. I left for like a brief minute, moved back to Philadelphia, and then came back to Polo and took a territory. So it wasn't dealing with department stores, but was dealing with boutiques and, kind of a door-to-door salesman.
Yeah.
Had a region and was a door-to-door salesman. That's actually when I met Dre, because we used to do the urban caravans together in Philly. My boss at the time left and became the VP at academics. And he was there for like 6-7 months. And I had left Polo and gone to Girbo and was miserable. And AC had this little brand that had shipped like 2 or 3 seasons called PRPS. That was like Don Juan's like canvas. Yeah, his creative canvas. AC was money, and they were pumping and doing crazy, and I'm sure it was pleasing and all those things. But PRPS was this like purist, chase no customer at the time, denim artistry. And Fred Mazzo was my boss's name, and he knew I was miserable, and he called and said, "You want to come over here and do this?"
So you went straight into PRPS, or did you do a stint at academics at all?
No. So I went to Girbo, and then I went straight to PRPS. I never sold academics. PRPS was nothing. It was 10 accounts globally. It was 3 seasons old. I'll be honest, I didn't even understand it. I didn't get it. I didn't get the product. I didn't get it at all.
So you were PRPS when they still had the academics A inside of the jean.
They had the little A right here on the shoulder too. Yeah. My second season, we got rid of all that.
Yeah. A lot of people didn't know about that, and I guess they took it off because they didn't want anybody.
Well, it's funny. Like, we had like 10 or 12 accounts in the world, and it was like Union and, I'm sorry, it was Nom de Guerre, it was American Rag, but it was like, a hood spot in the Cheltenham Mall, like a random academic retailer here or there would have it. Just because, it was a $300 jean when jeans were max 200. It went to a 42 and shit stopped at a 36. And like, it was a premium jean for the urban market that didn't really exist at the time. So it was just a interesting time, to be honest.
No, definitely. Well, Don Juan, PRPS, his brother Emmett, they changed the landscape of denim as we know it in the American market. As
100%. They made being Japanese denim mass. They're the reason Gap started doing.
It was accessible. It was definitely accessible, but also.
And I'll be honest, and they were the first guys in premium denim to do it by look, not by putting something on the back pocket. Like in those days, right? Ebisu, Red Monkey, and then even like True Religion, Antique Denim, right? It was that on the back.
Yeah, you had something going on the back pocket. You had some big art or some big signature stitch.
Yeah, I mean, True Religion used to even do like the heavyweight, like samurais in the back when Ebisu was popping. And like, I give Don Juan a lot of credit on that because the product was so banging that it looked mad rich just on the face. You didn't need it on the back pocket. You knew someone was wearing it because it was so unique. You were like, oh. I'm a $500 PRPS jeans.
Nah, like, I mean, I remember having conversations with Don Juan, and like he was just going over his denim in the process. And you could tell that this guy really loved and believed in that. And he was telling me about the machines that they were using. Like they were using Martinelli machines to do his washing. Right, there's a Italian machine that they would transport into wherever he was getting the denim done. And I was just like, this guy is like super nerding out on this. And I was like, it was incredible because he really cares about it.
Oh yeah. People don't know about him, man. Like I always said, like true artist, right? To watch him is like kind of amazing. But I always felt like if he wanted to design cars tomorrow, like the illest fucking car you ever saw in your life. If he wanted to make furniture,
but also he's a true artist. He's a true artist also, as in he can really draw.
Oh hell yeah! What are you talking about?
Portrait,
man? He went to the Sorbonne for a semester and did like artistry, like cartoons and all that noise. Like he's nuts with it.
Crazy. So from you building other people's brands, then you decided to build your own brand. via your first sales agency? What did that
So
look like?
it's interesting. So it wasn't really me, you know. I'd like to give myself the credit, but I was kind of like marching more towards like, all right, I'll be a VP, I'll be young, you know, I'll be a president, I'll be young, I'll ride this corporate thing out, I'll get a fat salary, and you know, I'll get my chips. Select Showroom, Joey and Matt really changed the game. They were the first like men's showroom. Dre talked about this on his Hypebeast podcast, to come in and just dominate and do mad volume and make a lot of noise. And I was on the road at the time with Daniel Yagar, one of my partners. And I had started spending a lot more time with Dre, one of my other partners now. Dre had moved to New York. And I remember Select got BBC, Billionaire Boys Club. And Daniel had Red Monkey at the time. I had PRPS. We were on the road and we found out that they got it. And they were really into a more contemporary and like glam rock part of the business. And when they got it, Daniel and I felt like, well, if they could get it, we could get it.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, you're young, you think everything will be positive. So Daniel's like, I could take Red Monkey. I'm thinking I could take PRPS. We get BBC and like be the hottest shit on the street day one. So that was like the first kind of like bug in my ear. And then Dre was already doing it.
But this is when you and Daniel came together and formed
Yeah, so we weren't even, you know, Daniel was off. Daniel had left his job, went off on his own. I was still working for PRPS. I was like talking to Dre and Hutch about doing it with them, like starting something else. They had already started the museum group. And then Daniel. And I actually like committed to Dre and Hutch, and then basically felt like they were already a year into it. And if I was going to do this, I needed to like be in the same place, same mindset with whoever I started with. So I just like told my boss 2 days before one of our trade shows, knowing that they would have to send me to the trade show, that I would get to sell that season, get that commission, and be able to tell all my retailers in person. Also hoping that my retailers would be like, yo, you have to give him the brand. And all that did happen, but Don Juan was basically like, yeah, no. So I left 2 weeks later, and the economy crashed like a month and a half after that. It was like, you know, pretty scary ride for first 2-3 years. So yeah. Daniel and I was 28 years old. I think Daniel had just turned 30. We started in February. I think the world ended in like March or April. We had a bunch of like small, unknown little brands. Yeah, kind of crazy times.
And after that, that's when you formed the foundation with the museum group.
So Daniel, in our first year of business, he'll probably kill me for talking about this, got deported. He's Canadian. He was a Canadian citizen at the time.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So in July of our first year, July 4th weekend, Daniel got deported. And he called me, and this was post 9/11. So they were pretty sensitive about people being here illegally. Not to say they're not now. So he got deported. That was a big pill to swallow. We were sharing an office with Ray and Antoine at the time. WSC as a brand came up as an opportunity. I couldn't afford to do it with just Daniel. So Dre and Hutch decided that we would all do it together. And then I think maybe 6 months later, Dre and Antoine stopped doing creative recreation. And we were talking to Keds and Pro Keds, again, as a group, even though we weren't formed yet. And when they stopped working with creative and we got the opportunity on Pro Keds and Keds, we just threw everything in a bucket and decided to all come together. So that was always the plan, but I think Daniel's lack of presence and the scenario with Pro Keds and Keds and creative just hastened the pace a bit.
And then y'all formed Voltron.
And then we formed Voltron and had like a dinner at Vegas. I think like that summer was like our first little jump off.
Man, that's dope. That's dope. Some parts of the story I didn't know. I remember Daniel getting deported and
yeah, that was interesting, man. My mom was an immigration lawyer at the time, so we got lucky. we got a little help, but it still took them a year and a half to get back.
No, I mean, but that's a blessing though. So, in forming this and having your own brand, what were some of the problems that you saw then in having the Vanguard Group, and in forming the foundation that you saw in order to, you letting people know what your services were, like letting people know that y'all were here and trying to get these new brands?
Yeah, well, I think when I first left PRPS and Daniel and I started Vanguard Group, shout out Pell for doing our first logo and business cards and all that. I was scared because we didn't have nothing. And you leave, you know the way it works. You got to sell. 6 months later, it ships. 2 months later, someone pays. The next month, you get paid. So it's a long time to go without any money.
And you hope for no returns.
Right, and I didn't make big money at PRPS. I did good for my age, for sure, but I wasn't stacking ridiculous chips. I was living in New York and living. So the initial fear at the beginning is, how are you going to get anything, and how are you going to hit your numbers, because we didn't have bank loans or family money behind us. I borrowed $10,000 from 10 different people, and that's how Daniel and I started, literally, with $100,000, but like $10,000 loans, half from my family. So that was scary, but there's more brands than salespeople. We both had good reputations. Things started to come. One thing led to another, to another, to another. As Dre told me it would. Some of the things that we got opportunities together out of the gate happened because Dre and Antoine already had a little bit more legitimacy in the market, a little bit of time in there. That certainly helped Daniel and I. And then the first kind of big break that gave us a good spotlight was in the first few months. And I got to thank Emmett, Harrell, Don Juan's brother. Emmett brought Matt Fontana in my showroom, and Matt was then the GM and one of the owners of A-Life. And we got a shot, with A-Life, maybe in 07, and they had never wholesaled before. So we got Colette, sneakers and stuff, and got to deal with some of these guys on a global level. We got to deal with Compliment and Slam Jam and distributor meetings, and we got to deliver this product, to the Barneys of the world, the Bergdorfs of the world, the best sneaker boutiques, and it was a good opportunity.
It gave leverage.
Yeah, and it gave us some clout, and probably the second really good one that Daniel and I had on our own was Super Sunglasses.
Yeah.
Again, that's like one of those brands.
Shout out to Super.
All I wear to this day.
Yeah.
That's just one of those brands where like everything just happens the way you dream of it happening. You go to a trade show, you set it up, and all the right stores walk up and buy it. Kanye wears it, all the pubs pick it up, and it's like pandemonium out the gate. Oh, yeah. So the numbers weren't big, but the energy was at the beginning. So those two definitely, gave us some footing.
Oh, so then, you had a bunch of fishermen coming to your pool.
Yeah, Super was the craziest first trade show I ever had outside of PRPF. Yeah. From an agency side, it was like one of the craziest first trade shows I ever had it with a brand.
So talking a little bit more about, marketing, but more shifting it towards marketing of brands, because I know you've been around the block, seen a lot of brands, dealing with a lot of younger brands too. What is some of the things that marketing wise you don't feel brands are doing properly or need to do better on their onset?
I think we're all so distracted now, with social and the screens and the videos, and everyone's for a cheap thrill, who can I pay quick to get it on quick, to sell quick, to get my following up quick. And I think there's just a lack of investment and integrity. There's a lot of brands out there that have no reason for being. So I think there's a lot of rush to market without looking at the market, filling a void for retailers or consumers, and really telling that story and communicating long term. I think everyone's so fast to get in. There's such a need to grab the hype so quickly, and the consumer's mindset is equally short. Their mentality is of the moment as well. So I just feel like everything's in rapid mode and super fast, and just a lack of true investment and integrity.
Yeah, but how do you change that when that's what the pipeline is? Everybody is rushing towards the same thing.
I think everything's cyclical, right? And I think we're probably at the precipice of like too many retailers, too many brands, too much of everything, overstimulation. You know, when you go to shop or go to look on your phone or go to read a fashion publication. I think what's going on right now is going to weed some of that out, unfortunately for some. And I think a lot of that is just like over time, the market corrects itself. I think the one thing is like for us, for my partners and I, we know what we're about, we know who we are, and like we're still going to stick to our guns
Mm,
regardless of what the noise is around us. And it's not to say that we won't play that game a bit too, right? When you're dealing with some bigger brands, the Kappas of the world and things of that nature, BBCs and whatnot, you're going to have access and an opportunity to deal with celebrity and influencer and things of that nature. And it's part of our process. It's just not our entire process.
yeah, well, one, I personally feel that story is always going to win because
100%.
it's a little more personal, and this goes for whether you're the foundation, the sales agency, or one of the brands that they're actually taking in. Like a beautiful story gets people involved. It's like it's almost like a serial tale that's happening that's also
Hmm.
episodic. Like the episode by itself is beautiful and I can capture this story like Star Trek, right? You get
It's
the
like a movie that never ends, man.
exactly. And I'm drawing you in. So I think that that's very true. I agree with you with what you're saying about what's going on is going to kind of like the dog is going to wag his tail and some of the fleas are going to get knocked off and it's going to be
Yeah.
rebalanced. That's going to be very interesting to see. But in brands that you saw, or what advice would you give to somebody who is on the onset after, you know, the industry kind of resets marketing wise, how to get their voice heard, their proper voice heard, not a fast one, but the proper one.
Patience. Patience, man. Patience and consistency. There's a lot of brands out there that look huge now. There's a lot of people out there that look huge now. People don't realize how long these people have been at it.
Yeah.
Joe Freshgood's been at it for 10 plus.
Oh, Amiri.
John Elliott been at it.
Yeah.
He had denim brand before he had this.
Yeah.
Amiri been at it, had multiple brands before this.
Yeah. Even
Jason
Buscemi.
Mark, 15 years old. Buscemi, multiple brands. Crushing everything, always been brilliant, but it takes time. Nick Diamond was at it for 8-9 years before it really popped. So I think if you look back, most of the people that are successful, Luigi Rude, same thing. He used to stand in front of his own rack with 6 garments behind him at the Capsule Show. Now he's like king, and it's amazing. But these guys worked and grinded and stuck true to themselves and kept the message consistent and evolved over time. Ronnie Fikes, all these guys,
Yeah.
Concepts, Dion, them. It was pressure and time. It was patience and time and authenticity.
What do
So
y'all?
that's the message I would give. Be patient. Like it don't happen overnight, and most good things that last don't happen overnight.
Oh, true indeed. If it was easy, everybody be doing it.
100%.
As
And look,
far.
you can do it all right and nothing work.
Yeah.
You can do it all wrong and get lucky as hell.
Oh yeah.
But none of those are like
Well, there's no formula.
averages.
Yeah.
No,
There's no absolute formula,
no,
right? Um.
no.
So with the foundation, what do y'all look for in a brand in order to take it on?
Our lives are different now in terms of like how we operate the agency and the kind of things we will do and how we function overall. We're no longer a traditional sales agency. So even the requirements of the things we look for have changed. Um, we all have to be into it, whether it's a home good or sneakers or clothes. Like there has to be some level of like understanding or relationship or belief that it's filling a void or there's some sort of opportunity. Most of the time, I would say there has to be a financial opportunity, but that definitely doesn't govern us 100% of the time. We take plenty of risk and invest in plenty of things that that have more long-term payback. Um, does it does it fill a void for the people we do business with that isn't currently being filled by something else that we carry or something else that dominates the space? I mean, and then guts. You know, a lot of it's just your gut. I'd say 50 to 60% of being good at this business is trusting your instincts and your gut.
But as far as like, if somebody comes to you with a concept, I don't really think that y'all are just gonna be like, okay, this is a good concept on paper. They have to come with something tangible.
Yeah, I mean, look, a finished product is necessity. We get pitched 20 times a day. I wouldn't waste anyone's time. And, you know, go back. Time is our most valuable asset, each and every one
Right
of us.
about that.
Can't afford to waste mine, don't want to waste anybody else's. So, you know, we've taken certain projects from like birth to paper to product to retail and so on and so forth, as you very well know. And some brands we do ourselves, but it's super rare. You know, we want somebody to come with the brand and the idea, the void, and ready, but needs the amplification, the business, the infrastructure, the math, the money, the mindset, the brain trust. But we don't want a concept from the ground up.
Oh, I hear that. How do you see the landscape has changed from, let's not say when you initially started, but when you had your own agency being the Vanguard Group to now, the sales landscape?
It's way more transactional now. It was because of the lack of technology at the beginning and the way that you dealt with your customers. You traveled and spent time and built and met families and met people's kids and really got to know each other and stayed at houses and stuff. And now, because of things like Zoom and Brand Boom and B2B platforms, it's much more so transactional. You know, there's very few, hey, how you doing? Calling just to catch up. I think what's going on in the last 6 weeks has probably brought a lot of that out of people, which is a good side effect of dealing with what we're dealing with. But that would be the biggest difference to me. It's much more transactional, much quicker, much shorter on the email and the text. You know, again, the phone is, 2 feet away from most people, but they don't put it to their ear.
No, it's a text, it's an email. No, I get it. Recently, Paris Fashion Week.
Paris is cool too. I never been. Yeah. I'd like to check it out. But whatever.
No, you was there.
Oh, my bad.
But Paris Fashion Week, I was having a conversation with Chris Wright from Nike, and was talking about just how the trade show has changed and basically is kind of dead, and that new energy is there. It's like everybody's popping up with their own, basically their own showroom during market week, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that business model could work here in the United States?
So it's funny, before TNA and before the project show,
TNA.
That's what it was.
What's TNA?
TNA was like the first boutique trade show. Merwin, I think, started it. Shout out Merwin. And it was small brand platforms in a cool setting in New York City and Soho. And you got your little booth and you called the retailers and there was a little sexy cafe and restaurant and, you created a little vibe for them. And I think his first show was small. There was 25 brands and then 50, then 75. But Sam came in with Project, 12, 15 years ago and just put it out, dominated, took over after the second show. So prior to that experience, it was all showroom. It was all market week appointments in your space. And I think that, again, everything is cyclical. I think we're headed back to that. Why would I at this point pay to do a show in New York City? I pay, tens of thousands of dollars a month in rent for a beautiful space where I could bring in a couple other brands, cater it, and have the full attention of the buyers.
Yeah.
So we started making that shift in New York a year and a half ago.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say.
Yeah. Go ahead.
What I was going to say is, in Paris, it definitely was about an experience, though. It felt like your own personal pop-up in market week. So some people were giving you this different experience. Some people were just strictly selling. Everybody was trying to, sell.
Yeah, no, some people had like pop-up studios. Some people did little, events at night. I mean, one of the brands we were working with, they had a retail activation the whole time. I mean, Rocket, we did like a little art installation in the middle of the space. But yeah, it's difficult to get that impact at a trade show.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, good or bad, it's dependent on you to get people to your space. But when you get them there, they're there to see you.
Yes.
So the benefit of a trade show is you get the random, oh shit, Harvey Nichols just walked by and they come into my space and I've been trying to get them on the phone for 6 months and they didn't return my calls. You don't get as much of that in Paris.
Yeah.
But when you do have them, you have them in a captivated space and you're able to tell your own story. So I think there's pluses and minuses to both, but I think the trade show experience for the retailer, which is the consumer at those shows, is flat.
Yeah.
And I think for the brands, it lacks energy and has for a long time. So there'll be new iterations of that and a reinvention of that, and the title shift again. I just think right now we're back in a space of, like, to your point, experience, tell stories. It means a lot to a lot of people. It's much easier to do in a controlled environment. It's your own.
So when you sell personally, when you're holding up your hanger,
Pinky in the air.
what's your personal sales philosophy when you're trying to move a product?
I try not to oversell. I try to let the retailer tell me what they need and then veneer what I'm saying to meet that need. So sometimes when you're selling a collection, it's better to ask questions than make statements.
True indeed.
Do you like this? Get some affirmation. Yes, cool. Then you're gonna, it's better to get them talking than for you to do all the talking and have them sitting there like bored out of their mind and rolling their eyes.
Oh,
so
sounds like a date.
Yeah. I don't pitch, and I try to get them I try to ask questions more than make statements. I would say is my personal philosophy.
How much did the flow charts and retail math that you learned over at Polo, how much do you still activate that now?
So there was I'll say it like this. Polo was like grad school for me, right? It's like I learned how to pitch. I learned about, I was young and the team was young. So I was able to walk in the design room and talk to the production people and mess with the sample guy. I was able to touch every advent of the business, and the creative directors liked me, and the head merchant, Allison, was friendly to me. So I could, I learned about warp and weft and 2x1 ribs and, intarsia, weights and fabrics. I got a real opportunity to be around all that stuff because I was a sales assistant. That was kind of like part of the gig. And I was the young guy and you just poked around. I owned the sample room, so I had to know all that crap. So Polo was like grad school, including the retail math. And when I went to AC and did PRPS, it was such a small business, I didn't get any help. Wow. So it was up to me to build pricing, which means I had to figure out margins, which means so every step of the career, like that foundation math got used over and over again and built upon. And then when we started the foundation or Vanguard Group, I did the books like I did our accounting on a Mead fucking spiral notebook. When we started the foundation, Dre and I did the accounting. We cut live checks. We used to sit there and settle up every week. Like, we didn't know what we were doing. Dre more so than me for sure, but we didn't even, we weren't even paying a bookkeeper at that time.
Yeah.
So I would say those foundations changed the math for me for like the rest of my life, because again, I was not a good student in totality, definitely a terrible math student, and just learning it that way, and it's quite easy, believe me, I'm no genius, just allowed me to propel further and further with each step of my career.
If there's a jewel that you have for somebody who's starting out, especially you being coming from being a salesman, but also being co-owner and founder of a sales agency, what would you give that kid that's thinking about coming out with his brand?
Don't give up. Don't give up. Even when you feel like it's over, don't give up. I will say in the first 3 to 5 years, I must have had 20, what the F am I doing moments, and like, I need to go work for somebody else and just put this thing down and call it a day. But I will say what like makes people successful entrepreneurs is they'll work twice as hard for half as much just so they don't have to work for somebody else. So like, you will want to give up. It's natural. It's human nature. It doesn't make you weak. It's can drive you crazy working 20-hour days, not getting any money. So just don't give up, man. Don't give up. You know, I fully believe that if you're good at what you do and you work really, really hard, eventually success will happen. You know, luck plays a role somewhere, but like eventually a success will happen.
Well, luck is for the prepared. Well,
yes, sir.
I will say thank you. I really do appreciate it. I've actually learned some stuff. I did.
Well, thank you, pal.
Yeah, nah.
And when you cut this up, you got to make me sound intelligent. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I'll do like ad libs. Like you hear my voice over it saying yes, and yes, I did blah blah, and I studied at Cambridge. I got you.
You got me. You got me. Appreciate you. Yeah.
Hey, thank you so much for tuning in, and make sure that you subscribe to the show in iTunes or wherever you consume podcasts. And if you feel inclined, please leave us a 5-star rating and give us a comment on your thoughts on this episode, ideas, and insight. Thank you.